Hello everybody, and welcome to a grade 11 accounting lesson on bank reconciliations. Now, bank reconciliations is a very important part of your syllabus, and it's something that you're going to be doing in grade 12 as well. So in today's lesson, we're going to first of all look at the purpose of a bank reconciliation statement. In other words, why do we do it? Then we're going to go through the steps that are necessary to prepare a bank reconciliation statement. And then finally, what we're going to do is update our bank account in the general ledger based on the information that you will extract from a bank statement. So you will see that there's a glossary of some terms. I'm not going to go through all of the different parts of the glossary, but these are the terms that you need to know. So you can go and have a look at your notes and be sure you understand what the various items that are there mean. Let us have a look now, though, at the key thing of today's lesson. We're looking at the bank reconciliation procedure. Now, practically in a business, what happens is that at the end of every month, you get sent, as a business, a bank statement. Bank statement, perhaps some of you have seen your parents receiving bank statements, perhaps some of you have looked at your own bank statements. And basically, a bank statement is something that's prepared from the bank's point of view to tell you all of the different transactions that have happened in your account. So this is really a sheet of paper that tells you what the bank thinks has happened in your account during that month. What you need to do with that bank statement is you need to compare it to your bank account in the general ledger. So what we're really doing here is we're trying to check whether or not the amount in your books matches the amount that the bank thinks you have. Obviously, it's going to be a problem if you think that you've got 50,000 Rand in the bank and the bank shows that you've only got 1,000 Rand. There's 49,000 Rands missing. And that could be very bad for your business. So as a result, we want to check that the bank is recording things correctly and that we are recording things correctly. So what we do is we do bank reconciliation. So if the figures on the bank statement do not match the figures in our bank account, then there are certain discrepancies. And the whole purpose of bank reconciliation is to understand these discrepancies and to account for them. Remember, the subject is called accounting. We are trying to account for differences or discrepancies between our books and the bank's books. So we're going to look at these discrepancies between our bank account in the general ledger and the amount on the bank statement. So what the business does is we update our books to fix the discrepancies, any things that we have left out in our books, and then we prepare a bank reconciliation statement to account for the difference. Now, I know that that might not be perfectly clear right now, but if we do an example, it will make a whole lot of sense to you. So the first thing we need to do is look at the two main types of discrepancies that can exist between the bank statement and the books of our business. Remember, there are two sets of books here. We are keeping our books and the bank is keeping its books. And there might be differences between them. So either our books do not contain certain transactions or the bank's books do not contain certain transactions. And that's what we have to look for. So the two main differences are, number one, something could appear on the bank statement, but not in the books of the business. That means we, as the business, have left something out. So we've either left out a receipt or we have left out a payment. If we've left out some money that we've received, what we have to do is enter it in the CRJ of our business. Because obviously our CRJ, its main column is bank, so we're interested in money that is coming in when we fill something in the CRJ. So if we've left a receipt out, then what we should do is update it by making the entry in the CRJ of the business. In the same way, any money that has left the business needs to go in the CPJ. So, for instance, we might not have recorded something that has been paid out of our bank account. We would need to record that in the CPJ to update our books. The second possible error, or not error but difference, between the bank statement and our books is if something appears in our books but does not appear on the bank statement. In this case, the bank has left something out. That doesn't mean that the bank is cheating us. All that it means is that perhaps we have recorded an entry in our books that has not yet been processed by the bank. Usually it takes some time for the bank to process certain transactions. So for instance, there's usually a delay of between 3 to 5 working days to process a check from another bank. What could have happened is we could have given somebody a check and written that we've paid that person in our books. What then happens is that that person takes it to the bank, but the bank has a delay. There is a time difference between the day that we've recorded it in our books and the time that it actually gets processed by the bank. So on the day that we receive that bank statement, that little piece of paper from the bank, that check has not yet gone through. That means that there is a difference between our books and the books of the bank. So what we need to do is account for that difference, and what's very important for you to know, mindsetters, is that any mistakes or any discrepancies where something is in our books but not in the bank's books will appear on our bank reconciliation statement. Remember, we are not the bank, so we do not control what the bank's books say. However, we can indicate what the bank needs to do to correct the discrepancies, and the way we do that is on the bank reconciliation statement. So to recap the two differences. Number one, something appears on the bank statement but is not in our books. The solution to that is that we put it in our books. Number two, something appears in our books but not on the bank statement. What we then do is we record it in the bank reconciliation statement. When we do the example, this procedure will become clear. Now, just some other notes that might be useful to you. If you look at this table here, these are some items that could appear on the bank statement but that have not been recorded in our books. So let's go through each of them very quickly so that you remember what they mean and how they work. Firstly, on the left-hand side, I've got items that need to go in the CRJ or that need to increase our bank account in the general ledger. Usually in a question, you get two types of questions in an exam or in a test. Some of them require you to fill in the questions in the journal. Some of them require you to fill in the answers in the general ledger. So you're either going to fill in something in the CRJ, or if the question asks you to do your bank T account, what will happen is you will enter the items on the debit or on the credit side of your bank account, depending whether they are increasing or decreasing your bank account. So the ones that will typically increase your bank account are direct deposits. Direct deposits really happen when somebody goes to the bank and they pay money with cash into your account. So let's say I owe somebody some money. I don't have to go to them and pay them physically. Maybe the person lives in another city or in another suburb. All I need to do is take the money to the bank and I can pay it into their bank account if I happen to know their banking details. But with the internet, things are so much easier. You don't need to visit the bank physically anymore. You can do what is called an EFT, which means that you log onto your internet banking site and you just give an instruction as a payment, which is called an EFT, an electronic funds transfer. So if somebody is paying me by direct deposit or by EFT, the chances are I don't know that they've paid me, because they maybe didn't phone me to tell me that the money is now in my bank account. The way I will see that that money has come into my bank account is I will see it appearing on that bank statement that gets sent to me at the end of every month. So with that EFT, all I will have to do is update my books and say, okay, this person has paid me the money now, so I will put it in my CRJ or on the debit side of the bank account. In the same way, if you think about why people leave money in a bank account, I'm sure you know the answer to this question. Why would you store your money in a bank account instead of just hiding it in a safe at home? The answer is easy. The bank pays you interest on your savings. So if you receive interest, what happens is the interest gets paid directly into your bank account, and again, you will see it on your bank statement. People don't sit and calculate the interest themselves. They wait until the bank statement appears, and the bank statement will show me how much interest I have earned in this month. What then happens is I update my books by showing what it should be. Remember though, mindsetters, you don't always earn interest. You can also sometimes have to pay interest. A very important concept in bank reconciliation is the concept of an overdraft. Remember, an overdraft is if I have a negative bank balance. So what would happen in a negative bank balance is that I would be charged interest because I owe the bank money, so I have to pay the bank interest on that amount. So I could either receive interest, in which case it's on the current account, or I could pay interest, in which case it's interest on overdraft. Obviously, the interest that I receive goes in the CRJ, but the interest on the overdraft, which is on the other side of my table here, remember my table shows you the items on the left go in the CRJ or on the debit side of the bank account, the items on the right go in the CPJ or the credit side of the bank account. So my table shows you here that interest on overdraft has to be shown in the CPJ or on the credit side because this is interest that we are paying. And once again, we'll only find out how much interest we are paying on the day we see that bank statement and see how much interest the bank has calculated. I hope that that makes sense to you. Also, another important item that we will only see on the bank statement is when there is a stale check that must be cancelled. So I'm sure that many of you know the word stale from food that's gone stale. A check can also go stale. What that means is once a check is 6 months old and nobody has bothered to take it to the bank, you then cannot ever pay that check again. So if that check has never been paid, we have to cancel that check. We've never actually paid the money has never left our bank account. So something you should always think about, mindsetters, when you're doing a question. There should always be some alarm bells when there is a check with a date on it. You should check to see whether that date is 6 months ago. This is a little trick that sometimes comes into the question. Every time there is a check that has been outstanding for 6 months or longer, that check is stale and you'd have to cancel it. Remember, if you are cancelling a check, you have never paid the check because the money never left your bank account. So the way we cancel it is we put it in the CRJ, but I'll show you later on how that works with an example. So remember, stale checks go in the CRJ. Now, what goes on the other side of your bank account? In other words, what goes in the CPJ? We've already spoken about our interest on overdraft, which is interest that we have to pay. Another thing that appears there, though, is a dishonoured check. So a dishonoured check is something when somebody pays me money and I try to take it to the bank and the check, they usually call it that the check bounces. It cannot be paid. It's often called also an unpaid check. Usually that means that the person who gave me the check did not have enough money in his or her bank account for that money to be able to pay it over to me. So that is what we call insufficient funds. We thought we'd received the money, but then we find out on the bank statement that check never went through. So in fact, we have to cancel that in the CPJ, but I'll show you again how to do that. Also, please, mindsetters, when you're studying for your exams, remember the important reasons for which a check can be dishonoured. Usually it's because it's insufficient funds. In other words, the person didn't have enough money to pay us, but it could be other reasons as well. For example, the person put the wrong name on the check, or the amount in words did not match the amount in figures. There could be some or other discrepancy on the check, or a mistake on the check, or the incorrect date, or the incorrect signature. Read through your notes before the exams to make sure that you know what the various reasons are for which a check can be dishonoured. Another important thing is that we have bank charges. I'm sure that you've seen sometimes if you go to an ATM with a bank account card and you use a different ATM from your own bank, often you get a bank charge. That other bank charges you for using its ATM because you are not a customer of that bank, so they charge you something to use their ATMs. The bank charges for all sorts of different reasons. They charge you when there's a credit card that you get. They charge you for getting a new checkbook. They charge you sometimes when you make a balance inquiry. there are monthly service charges. All of those things are bank charges. And once again, you will not know about them until the day that you receive your bank statement and it tells you this is how many bank charges you have incurred this month. So obviously, those are charges that are leaving your bank account, so we would have to record them on the credit side of the bank account or in the CPJ. What's very important though is that when you're doing bank charges, you add them all together. So you don't count the credit card levy and the service charges and the deposit fee and the cash handling fee. You don't show them as separate items. What you do is you lump them all together and you just call them one item, bank charges. But I'll show you how to do that when we work through the example together. And then the final two things that usually appear like this on the bank statement but not in our books are what we call debit orders and stop orders. These are important concepts and I'll quickly revise what they mean. Debit orders and stop orders are almost the same thing. They are just instructions to a bank to pay a certain amount to a certain person every month. So for example, if you are using a cell phone, your cell phone bill changes every month if you're not prepaid. And you might have to pay your cell phone service provider a certain amount of money every month. What you can do to save yourself the time and the trouble to pay that amount every month, you can do what's called a debit order with the bank, which is really just an instruction telling the bank at the end of every month they must pay your cell phone bill to whoever your cell phone service provider is. So that's very convenient and it saves you time and it saves you money because you don't have to physically drive to the bank or log onto the internet to make that payment. The bank will do it for you automatically every month. However, you won't know what the amount was until you look at your bank statement. There it will tell you what the amount was for the debit order. So once again, you would have to record this in the CPJ to show that money has left your bank account. Okay, so those are the items that appear on the bank statement, but that do not appear in our books. That's the first type of discrepancy that can exist. Let's now look at the second type of discrepancy that can exist. And remember we said that we can also have items that appear in the books, but not in the bank statement. So these are things that we have recorded, but that the bank has not recorded. Now we are usually in a question, we are doing the accounting for a particular business. We are not doing the accounting for a bank. So we cannot fix and change the bank's CPJ and CRJ. We've got no access to the bank's books. That's probably a good thing because we've got enough to do handling our own accounts. So what we have to do, if ever there's something that does appear in our books which does not appear in the bank statement, and we know our books are correct and the bank has not yet processed this entry, what we do is we draw up a bank reconciliation statement. And the bank reconciliation statement looks like this, and you need to understand it very well. I'm just going to abbreviate it as BRS for bank reconciliation statement. It usually starts off with the balance as per the bank statement. So that is on your bank statement at the end of the month what the bank thinks you have got. And that is a negative if it's a debit and a positive if it's a credit. So I'm not going to go through the details as to why it is like that. Please consult your notes and make sure you understand why a debit is a negative amount in the bank and a credit is a positive amount in the bank. We then have to know the format very clearly. We are going to, on the second line, include any outstanding deposits. Outstanding deposits are things that we have recorded in our CRJ. We've deposited that money in the bank account, so it should be there, but it is not yet there for whatever reason. And we are going to have to check that the bank records that deposit at some later date. So what we'll do is we credit the outstanding deposit and the amount we're going to write on the credit side of the bank reconciliation statement. Opposite thing to an outstanding deposit is an outstanding check. What this is a check that we have paid or we've given somebody to pay for something, and that check has not yet been processed in the bank account. In other words, the money has not yet left our bank account. And those outstanding checks are listed, usually in a question there are more than one of them. What you do is you list them all with their numbers. So you'd write maybe check number 52, check number 65, or whatever the numbers of the checks are. You'd write down one below each other, and you'd write the amounts in the debit column of the bank reconciliation statement. Remember that you are debiting the outstanding checks and crediting the outstanding deposits. I always tell my classes the way to remember that is that the C goes with the D. In other words, you credit the deposit, and then the D goes with the C. You debit the checks. Remember that, and you should have no difficulties. Now, the third type of thing that could happen is that the bank has perhaps incorrectly processed something. So the bank has made some or other error. Okay? What happens when there's an error that the bank has made is we will show it on the bank reconciliation statement as an error, and then we will phone the bank and ask the bank to rectify the error. But we have to show that the bank has made an error by debiting or crediting the errors on the bank reconciliation statement. So that's the next item. And again, remember, debits on the bank reconciliation statement are negatives. Credits on the bank reconciliation statements are positives. So any error that should increase our bank account, we're going to credit. Any error that should decrease our bank account, we are going to debit. And then finally, the last step in the bank reconciliation statement is to include the one item that's from our point of view, which is the debit or the credit balance as per the bank account. Now you'll see when I go through the procedure and the trial question how this gets done. But basically what you're going to do is take your bank account and record all the things that were missing. In other words, all the direct deposits, dishonored checks, bank charges, interest, service fees, all of those things, and you're going to calculate an updated bank account balance. This is the number that appears right on the bottom of the bank reconciliation statement, and it's the number that must balance our bank reconciliation statement. And because this one is the only one that's from our point of view, this is the one where the debit is positive and the credit is negative. So make sure you understand that. Once again, go through your notes and make sure you understand why the bank account from our point of view is positive and from the bank's point of view is negative, and make sure you know that this last item goes in the debit column if positive and the credit column if negative. And then that's the moment of truth in a test or exam when you add up all the debits and you add up all the credits, and you're supposed to get the same answer for both of them. That's the moment of truth. I know that that's always a very stressful time in an exam or in a test because you're always crossing your fingers and holding thumbs and praying or whatever to hope that your two totals are equal. And most of the time they will be if you've done it correctly. But just something as an exam tip, please, please, please do not spend unnecessary time in trying to balance the bank statement, the bank reconciliation statement, if it doesn't balance the first time. Chances are that you might then miss out on another question later on, and you may have made just a very, very small mistake that could cost you 1 or 2 marks. So don't waste unnecessary time in trying to calculate the correct balances. Rather go on and finish the paper, and only when you finish the paper can you come back and check to see if you can find where the mistake is. Okay, so that was the theory on the bank reconciliation statement. So let's now go and tackle one of the questions. So what we've got here is question 1. It says that some of the information is already filled in for you, and what the question wants you to do is to prepare the bank account for the month of November 2008, and it's asking you to make the entries directly in the bank account. Remember I said to you that there are 2 types of questions. Sometimes they ask you to make the entries in the CPJ or in the CRJ. Other times they ask you to make them directly in the bank general ledger account, and this is one of those where we have to make them in the bank account. So you can see there it's one of those star questions. There are a few items missing which we're going to have to fill in. But there's a second part to the question as well, where it says we should prepare the bank reconciliation statement. Sorry, it looks like there's a small typing error there. That should be the 30th of November 2008. Bank reconciliation statements are always prepared at the end of the month. And here we go. They've given us a template for the bank reconciliation statement, but you can see that it's completely blank. So you need to understand very well what goes in there. You need to learn the format of the bank reconciliation statement so that you'd be able to answer any question that they throw at you. Now, let's have a look at the information that we've been given and have a look at the question and see what we need to do. Okay, so our first item here, if we look at it, is the bank reconciliation statement on the 31st of October 2008. So what this is last month's bank reconciliation statement. It's the bank reconciliation statement for last month. First step is always to look at last month's bank reconciliation statement and see what they're telling you there. They're telling you that you had a favorable balance of 6250 according to the bank statement, and they're telling you that there was an outstanding deposit, there were 3 outstanding checks, and then there is a question mark over here for the balance as per the bank account. Remember, the balance as per the bank account is the balance from your general ledger. So, if we've got an outstanding balance on the 31st of October 2008, that balance is going to be the opening balance for the 1st of November 2009. So the 1st of November 2008. So the first thing that we have to look at, if you look at your answer sheet, they're asking you to prepare the bank account, and all that they've indicated for us so far are our total receipts and total payments. That's the only information that they've given us so far. They haven't even given us a balance carried down or a balance brought down. That should go over here. So we can already see that that's the first thing we're going to have to calculate. I'm going to put in balance brought down over here, which is the balance on the 1st of November. And I've just said to you that the balance on the 1st of November should be the same balance as the 31st of October. So let's have a look at last month's bank reconciliation statement, and we should be able to see how to calculate it. You see there's a question mark here, and we know that the totals on the 2 sides have to be the same. So what that means is that they've given us the favorable balance on the bank statement, and they've given us the outstanding deposit, and here they've given us the 3 outstanding checks and added them up to put them there in brackets as 9050. You should be able to see that if we want to know what this bank reconciliation statement's balance as per bank account is, all we have to do is take these 2 numbers, the favorable balance on the bank statement and the outstanding deposit. From that we subtract the outstanding checks, and we should be able to find out what our balance as per bank account is, because the 2 sides should add up. So let's do that on the calculator. What we're going to do is we're going to take the 6250 to begin with. We're going to add this 3750 over there, and we're going to subtract the 9050 for the outstanding checks, which gives us 950. What that tells us is that we had a balance as per the bank statement of, balance as per the bank account of 950 Rand. Let me fill it in here so that we don't forget it. That balance is the number that makes last month's bank reconciliation statement add up, and that's also then obviously the number that we started with on the 1st of November. So let me just return to the answer sheet here. We've worked out already that the balance at the beginning of the month is 950 Rand, and we've already got one of our missing stars without doing anything else. Okay, let's now look at the rest of the information that they've given us. Let me just erase these, because we're going to need to tick off and cross off some things on the bank reconciliation statement to see whether those items are still outstanding or not during this month. So let's look at information point number 2. Information point number 2 says, check number 715 was issued in favour of the Yenzani's Children's Home as a donation on the 14th of May 2008. They're talking about check 715, which is this check over here for 550 Rand. It's outstanding. So what that means is it has never left our bank account, but we've paid it to the Yenzani Children's Home as a donation. Now, here is where the alarm bells should start ringing. They have told us that we did this on the 14th of May 2008. Why would they give us that information? Think about it. When they tell you that a cheque has been outstanding for a long period of time, you should always first check whether or not that cheque is stale. So on the 14th of May, we paid this cheque out, but the children's home has never taken it to the bank. Maybe they've lost it, maybe the person forgot to go and take it to the bank, maybe the children's home is closed down altogether. We don't know, there's not enough information. What we do know though is that since the 14th of May, that cheque has not been paid. And today's date in the question is the 31st of, we're doing bank reconciliation for the 30th of November. As you can see, per our answer sheet, we're doing it for November 2008. So let's see how old this cheque is. 14th of May, so we've got May, June, July, August, September, October. We should be able to see that on the 14th of October, this cheque has actually become stale. It's 6 months old. So that cheque can never be paid. Even if the person was to find the cheque now and take it to the bank and try to pay it, the bank will not be able to give them the money because it's more than 6 months old. So what we actually have to do is, when there is a cheque like that, we have to cancel it because the cheque is now stale. So it was a cheque for 550 Rand, and what we must do to cancel it is we have to reverse the original transaction. So on the 14th of May, think about what we did. We gave these people a cheque for 550 Rand. So we would have recorded in our CPJ that we've paid the Yenzani Children's Home 550 Rand for donations. Now, that cheque is stale. So we cannot have that in our general ledger anymore, that we've paid that cheque, because now it will never be paid. So to reverse it, we just flip the original transaction around and record in the CRJ that we have received 550 Rand back from the Yenzani Children's Home, reducing our donations. So we never paid them, we're just cancelling the original entry out. So what we must do is we must take that 550 Rand and we must record it in our CRJ. Remember, all stale cheques get cancelled in the CRJ. So if we go back to our answer sheet wants us to record it in the bank general ledger account, so we need to record it on the debit side of the bank account, because it's now as if we're getting that 550 Rand back because it's never been paid. So let me put it on the next available line, 550 Rand, and that was money that we originally paid as a donation, which has now been cancelled. So on this line, I'm going to write the word donations, because these are donations that have been cancelled in the general ledger. Let's have a look at the next transaction. Next transaction says, number 3, the bank statement received from Centra Bank on the 30th of November had a favourable balance. Notice that they have not given us an amount. So that's going to be quite important for how we tackle this question. If they don't give you an amount, what that usually means is that you're going to have to calculate the amount by balancing the bank reconciliation statement. If they told you what the amount was, you'd immediately write it in. But if they haven't told you what the amount is, chances are that you're going to have to calculate it. So let's look at what we've been given in the answer book. We know that the balance as per bank statement should always appear on the bank reconciliation statement. So it should appear on the first line, favourable balance as per the bank statement. If we knew what the amount is, we'd write it in. But we don't know what the amount is. All we know is that it is favourable. What that means is that somewhere here on the credit side, we are going to fill in the answer. But the way we're going to do it is, once we've filled in everything else, we're going to work backwards to make the two sides balance, the debits equal the credits, and so this favourable balance is going to be the number that balances our bank reconciliation statement. The good news is that if you get a question like this where they don't give you the favourable balance at the beginning of the month, the chances, well, 100% is going to balance because you're just going to calculate the number that makes it balance. Okay, so we've got quite a few more transactions to do. And I know you've been concentrating very hard for the first part, so I think you've earned the break. So when we get back after the break, we're going to look at the cash journals and we're going to start doing some more of the entries. Enjoy your break, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. You'll remember before the break, we looked at some of the first transactions of this question, and we saw that in this question, the bank reconciliation statement did not give us a balance as per the bank statement. So we know that we're going to have to calculate some number that appears here, which is going to balance our bank statement out at the end of the, balance our bank reconciliation statement out at the end of the exercise. What I would always suggest that you do is sometimes when you start a question, do your work properly and fill in the items that you know, because then you're going to know where to look for certain things. So if we've got a completely blank bank reconciliation statement like this, we know that the first item has to be outstanding deposits. So let's just write that in there. And usually the question has only one outstanding deposit. So usually you can go onto the very next line and fill in your next item, which is your outstanding checks. So I'm just going to write those on our bank reconciliation statement so that we have them. This is also usually a good thing in a test or in an exam. Sorry, I've written deposits there. Let me just fix that. It's usually a good thing in a test or in an exam to calm your nerves and realize that you know how to do the question by filling in the items that should be there. So I'm filling in here outstanding deposits and outstanding checks. Then the next thing that you need to do is think back to your theory. We know that we've said that deposits are credited. The D goes with the C. So write a little CR next to it to remind you that when you find an outstanding deposit, you're going to write the number in the CR column. Also with outstanding checks, we know that they are usually going to be debited. So write a little DR next to it to be sure that you're going to put it in the correct column. And also we know that the favorable balance as per the bank statement, we know that that is from the bank's point of view, and we know that favorable balances from the bank's point of view are usually credits. So I'm just going to write a little CR next to there just to remind myself that when I've calculated the missing number, it should appear in the credit column over there. Now that we've done that little preparation for the template, let's have a look and see what the next transaction is. So our next transaction says the following. It says, after the cash journals for November 2008 and the bank reconciliation statement for October 2008, remember that's last month's bank reconciliation statement that they're talking about, you should always check to see whether these outstanding amounts, these outstanding checks and this outstanding deposit, you need to check and see whether they have been accounted for. Because if they're not accounted for, we will have to list them as outstanding again this month, and we'd actually have to phone the bank and find out why this is happening. Okay, remember though that we've already dealt with outstanding check number 715. That was the one that we donated to the children's home, and we've already dealt with that one. So we've only got two more to check, which is number 835 and 840, but we'll see what the question says about them in a moment. Now it says that what we've done is we've compared the cash journals for November and the bank reconciliation statement for October with the bank statement that we've received from Centra Bank on the 30th of November. And it says that there were lots of items that remained unchecked. I'm sure that you've done exercises like this in class. Most textbooks have them, where they show you a bank statement and they show you your books, and you actually sit and cross off each and every single entry that matches on both sides. And then you circle the items that appear on the bank statement and not in the books, and the other way around, you circle in your journals all of the items that appear in the journals but not on the bank statements, and then correct them. They've done that work for you, and they've told you that the following items remained unchecked. So the first thing is 4.1. This should be familiar to most of you. Service fees of 87 Rand, government levy of 7 Rand, credit card transactions fees of 56 Rand, and interest credit of 25 Rand. These are all items that appeared on the bank statement but not in the journals. So we're going to have to update our journals by recording them where they are supposed to go. Remember we said that service fees and government levy and credit card transactions fees can all be described as bank charges. Remember I said to you that there were a whole lot of different bank charges that we get, but we don't care in our accounting what they were for. All we're interested in that it was some type of charge that the bank has levied on us. Now I just want to take you back for a moment to your grade 10 work. Do you remember in your grade 10 work you probably discussed some of the GARP principles, or you may have encountered them somewhere in your grade 10 textbook. The GARP principles are those items which are now also known as the International Financial Reporting Standards. They are your standards that tell you what good accounting practice is. And they are sort of things that a good accountant should follow if he or she wants to be an accurate and fair and honest accountant. And one of those International Financial Reporting Standards is that there is a principle of materiality. I'm sure you remember the principle of materiality. Principle of materiality just says that we group items together that are the same, but we show items that are different or of a different type as a separate item. So if you look at this, you can see that the first three, service fees, government levy, and credit card transactions fees, are all bank charges, as we've said before. But interest is something very different. It's not a bank charge. Interest is defined as a charge for borrowing money. If you borrow money from anybody, chances are that you're going to have to repay them with interest. So according to our principle of materiality, which says that we're going to group similar items together and leave separate items separate, we have to show our interest as a separate entry. Okay, so let's see how this information has to be recorded. We know that bank charges are things that we pay. The bank has made us pay money. They've made us pay 87 Rand for service fees, 7 Rand for government levy, 56 for credit card transactions fees, and if we add all of that up, let's do that quickly, it was 87 Rand plus 7 Rand plus 56. The answer comes to 150. So what that is telling us is that during the month of November, we have paid the bank 150 Rand in bank charges. But we haven't recorded it yet because we didn't know about it. The only time we found out about it was when we got that bank statement, that piece of paper that tells me what has happened on my bank account during the month. So obviously our books are wrong, so we have to put these bank charges, these 150 that we've just worked out, we have to put them in our general ledger. So let's do that now. We'll go back to our answer book, and our answer book has got the bank account for November 2008. It's got a positive and a negative side. Because we are paying those bank charges, I think it should be obvious to you that we have to record them on the credit side of our bank account, because on the credit side of our bank account, the bank goes down. So let's look at the next available star. We'll write here bank charges, and the amount is going to be 150 Rand. That's the amount by which our bank has decreased because of bank charges. Next item, though, is something separate. It's still part of the same transaction, but it tells me that there is interest of 25 Rand, which has been credited to my bank account. That's very important for you to understand. Credited to my bank account. Remember, you can earn interest or you can pay interest. And the question is, which of these is relevant? Which one is interest that we've earned and which one is interest that we have paid? The way we look at it is we must remember that the bank statement is prepared from the bank's point of view. And amounts that increase our bank account are, from the bank's point of view, credits. Just to recap why that is the case, if I've got money in a bank account, the bank actually owes me that money. They have to give me my money back if I go and try and withdraw it. So if the bank puts interest into my bank account, I actually have got more money that they have to give me if I want it. So in other words, they owe me more money. I am like a creditor to the bank if I've got a positive bank balance, because the bank must give me that money on the day that I come to withdraw it. So what that means is that if the bank is crediting my account with interest, that means that I have earned interest. Remember, from the bank's point of view, the numbers are flipped around. Credits are items that increase my bank account from their point of view, and debits are items that decrease my bank account. Very, very important concept, and something that you should revise and make sure you understand clearly. So this 25 Rand actually represents money that has come into my bank account, not money that has left my bank account. So we need to record it in our answer sheet on the debit side, because that's money that's coming in. So let's make the entry quickly. We'll put the 25 Rand over here, and we can call it interest. They haven't specified what we've earned the interest for, so the easiest way to do it is just to write here interest income. But you might also write interest on savings account or interest on current account. We don't know what the details are. As long as the word interest appears there, you should get the marks for that question. Okay, let's have a look at the next adjustment. The next adjustment says, check number 835 appeared on the bank statement, as did the outstanding deposit of 3750. So they're telling us that this check and this deposit were actually processed by the bank. This money has actually been recorded. So let's look back at last month's bank reconciliation statement. You see here is check 835. They're telling us in this information point that check 835 now appeared on the bank statement. In other words, it was outstanding last month, there it was outstanding, but this month it has been paid. This money has now left our bank account and it's all accounted for. When that happens, you actually don't need to do anything, because you've recorded this check number 835 in last month's journals. In last month's CPJ, you recorded that you paid check 835, but the bank has not recorded it yet. Maybe the person to whom you gave the check has not yet gone to the bank to pay it in. Maybe they've lost the check, or maybe it took some time before the bank was able to process this check. However, we know now that the money has left our bank account, the person has been paid, it's all been done, so we don't have to worry. All we do is we cross it off, as I've done here, on the bank reconciliation statement of last month. That check has been accounted for. In the same way, second part says that the outstanding deposit of 3750, in other words, this amount here, has now entered my bank account. It's no longer outstanding. It's appeared on my bank statement. So if I go back here, we can see that this here I've circled from last month, this outstanding deposit. It has now been entered into my bank account. The money is there, it's safe, I don't need to worry about it anymore. So all I do is I cross it off. I don't need to make an entry, because this outstanding deposit appeared in last month's CRJ. That's why it was outstanding at the end of October. However, you'll notice that the question only mentions those two items, check number 835 and the outstanding deposit. It does not mention check number 840. So check number 840 over here was outstanding last month, and it doesn't mention it, so we can assume that it's outstanding at the end of November as well. So for now, we still need to worry about that check. We're going to read on and see if there are any other transactions that affect that check and will not be able to, or will be able to cancel it. But if not, we must record it as outstanding again. But we'll see what happens as we go along. If we go further now, we're on adjustment 4.3. It says, a check drawn by Sport On Suppliers for 400 Rand appeared on the bank statement of Spot On Suppliers. Notice there's this little letter here, this R. Sport On versus Spot On. Obviously there's been a mistake, because there was a check that Sport On Suppliers drew from their bank account, which now appears on our bank statement. In other words, we've paid 400 Rand because the bank mixed us and Sport On Suppliers up. We are Spot On Suppliers, and a check that Sport On Suppliers drew has mistakenly been taken from our account. So what this is a mistake that the bank needs to fix. So we're going to have to phone the bank, and we're going to have to explain that they've made a mistake and ask them please to correct it. In the meantime, though, we're doing our accounting, so we're trying to account for discrepancies between the bank's books and our books. So this item is going to have to be recorded in the bank reconciliation statement as an incorrect entry on our account that the bank has made. So let's have a look at what we should do. If we go back to our answer sheet, we need to record this in the bank reconciliation statement. So I've left some space for outstanding deposits and I've left some space for outstanding checks. And usually you only need 2 lines at the very end. There'll be a total right at the bottom here, and there'll also be a balance as per our own bank account. Remember, we're going to recalculate our totals in the general ledger. In other words, we're going to recalculate this bank account here and work out a new balance brought down at the end of the month, and that number is going to appear over here on our balances per bank account. But in the meantime, we have to record and leave space for outstanding checks, and we also have got to record here that there was an incorrect entry by the bank. So we're now dealing with this amount of 400 Rand that was mistakenly charged to our account, that was mistakenly drawn from our bank account. What we need to figure out now, though, is whether this entry is a debit or whether it is a credit. So the way we do that is we look at it very carefully. Here's the information again. It says that the check was drawn for 400 Rand and it appeared on the bank statement. So in other words, what the bank did is they reduced our account by 400 Rand, thinking that we were spot-on suppliers when we are actually spot-on traders. So how would the bank fix it if they have mistakenly taken money out of our account? Very easy, they just have to put it back in and make our account go up. Once again though, we need to remember that the bank reconciliation statement is prepared from the point of view of the bank for everything except the final entry, the balances per bank account. So we've said earlier that anything that increases our bank account goes on the credit side, whereas anything that decreases our bank account goes on the debit side. So the bank has made a mistake, they've made an incorrect entry. To fix it, what they'll need to do is increase our bank account, so we're going to write the 400 Rand on the credit side, bearing in mind that this is from the bank's point of view. We are of course going to phone the bank and ask them what happened and ask them to please rectify the error. Also, at the moment, remember, the other business is probably also seeing an error because they are thinking that 400 Rand has been paid from their bank account, and actually it hasn't. It's been paid from our bank account by mistake. The bank must fix this error, but until such time, it's going to be shown as an error made by the bank on our bank reconciliation statement. Let's have a look at the next adjustment, which states that a check received for 363 Rand in full settlement of an account of 375 was dishonoured by Central Bank due to insufficient funds. I'm sure you've all seen what to do with a dishonoured check before. I'm sure you know what happens. We received a check, we recorded it in our CRJ that we've received this money, and then at the end of the month, shock and horror, we get our bank statement and we see that this money has never actually been paid into our account because the check was dishonoured. Remember, sometimes the question also refers to this as an RD check. So if you see the words RD, what the bank does is it stamps the check with the letters RD, which stands for refer to drawer, to show you that the check has been dishonoured. How do we fix this transaction? Well, it's quite simple. We never received that 363 Rand in the first place, so all we're going to do is we're going to cancel that transaction by putting it into the CPJ, as if we're giving the debtor back the money that she paid us originally. So the check was dishonoured because the person had insufficient funds. You've done this type of adjustment already in grade 10, I'm sure, because usually in grade 10 you learn about dishonoured checks. To deal with a dishonoured check, what we have to do is we have to put the amount in our CPJ or on the credit side of our bank account to indicate that we've given the debtor her money back. Our details are always going to be debtors control, so let's write that in here on the next available line. And now the question comes in. If you look at the transaction very carefully, you will see that there was a discount given. It says that a check was received for 363 in full settlement of an account of 375. So if you look at that, you'll see that the person paid us 363, but they owed 375. We actually gave them a discount of 12 Rand. So now the big question is, what's the amount that we're going to fill in our CPJ? Are we going to fill in the 375 or are we going to fill in the 363? The answer is that we are going to fill in the 363 because that was the amount we recorded in our bank account that we've received in the first place. The debtor only paid us 363. So what we will do is we will reduce the bank account by 363 as if we're paying the debtor back the money that was paid to us. The extra 12 Rand needs to be done in a completely separate journal. The discount, remember, from your grade 10 work, you cancel discounts in the GJ, not in the CPJ, not in the CRJ. So we're not going to worry about that transaction because bank reconciliation only deals with our bank account. So we're only working with the 363, and that is the amount of money that we're going to write in over here as our debtors control account. Okay, so that's that transaction done. Our next one is one that requires quite a bit of calculation, and this is quite a higher order thinking question. So have a look at this and see if you can do it. It says that an amount of 5,956.50 was deposited directly into the bank account of our business by Finbank Limited. This was for the repayment of a fixed deposit plus interest at 9% for the last 6 months. And then it says, do not include the cents for interest on fixed deposit. Sometimes when you see a question like this, you have to read it twice or 3 times to figure out what's actually going on. Okay, but let's try and simplify what the transaction is telling us. It tells us here that an amount of 5,956.50 was deposited into the bank account. So what happened is someone took that money and paid it into our bank account, and it was paid in by Finbank Limited. It was for the repayment of a fixed deposit. In other words, we are getting our money back. The fixed deposit is now maturing, it's reached its maturation date, and we're getting the money back plus the interest. So this appeared on our bank statement, and we have to adjust our bank account accordingly. So this 5,956.50 has to go on the debit side of our bank account, and it needs to show that our bank account is going up because we're getting our money back and we're getting our interest back. So we know that we have to put that amount in our bank account over here somewhere. The problem though is that we're doing the bank account, and you have to be very specific in the bank account. In the same way that we kept bank charges and interest separate, what we have to do is keep the fixed deposit separate from the interest. So we're receiving some money back for the fixed deposit. So let's make an entry here, but we don't know what the amounts are yet. Our fixed deposit is maturing, and we're also getting some money for interest on fixed deposit. Remember, you're not allowed to abbreviate in an accounting question, so I'm writing very small. This does say interest on fixed deposit. You sometimes have to squeeze in your letters. I have to show those two separately. So I know that the two of them together are going to add up to this amount that we have here of 5,956.50. But I need to show in my bank account how much was for the fixed deposit and how much was for the interest. Notice that the question doesn't tell me how much I invested in the first place, and that's where the question gets a little bit more challenging, because we actually have to calculate how much the fixed deposit was to begin with. So let's have a look at how we could do a calculation like that. Firstly, it says to us that the amount was 5,956.50. So I'm going to write here that the interest plus the fixed deposit amounts to 5,957. I'm changing the question to 5,957 because it says that we don't need to include the cents for the interest. So I'm just rounding it off to the nearest rand. So we know that we've received our fixed deposit back and we've received our interest, and those two together add up to 5,957. Now, what we'll do is we let the fixed deposit equal X. We want to know what part of this 5957 is for the fixed deposit and what part of it is for interest. So I'm going to change this equation and put an x in here where the fixed deposit is. And we know that the interest on the fixed deposit, if we add it, we get 5957. What else do we know about the interest? We know that it is 9% and we know that it is 6 months. Those two pieces of information are crucial and they should let you see how to carry on. If I want to work out interest on a fixed deposit, what do I do? Very easy. I will take the fixed deposit and I will multiply it by the interest rate and I will multiply it by the number of months over 12. I'll say that again. I will take the fixed deposit, multiply it by the percentage interest rate, and multiply it by the number of months over 12. So let's write that in mathematical terms. I'm sure your algebra is good. What we do is we take the fixed deposit, which is x, it's the number we're trying to calculate. We're going to multiply it by 9%, 9 over 100, or 0,09, and it was for 6 months, so we're going to multiply it by 6 over 12. So this part that I've written in brackets is my interest, and the x in front of it is my fixed deposit. So what I have is if I add that all together, I get the answer of 5957, because I know if I take my interest and add it to my fixed deposit, I get my final answer. Now, how do we solve this equation? Easiest way to do it is just to take out the x, because you see everything here is multiplied by x. I'm just going to write a little bit further across these next transactions where I have some space. If I factorize this, if I take the x out, I've got a 1 left over here from this x, because x times 1 gives me x. And then I've got this part here in brackets, which is the 9 over 100 times by 6 over 12. So I factorized this. You can check for yourself if I multiply the bracket out, I'm going to get the original answer over there. And we know that that equals 5957. Now, how's your algebra? If we want to solve for an x, and the x is multiplied by this whole thing in brackets, what we do is we just divide both sides by the thing in brackets. So I'm just going to write this underneath here. 1 plus 9 over 100 times 6 over 12. And that's in brackets. And because I've divided both sides by it, on this side it's going to disappear. So now I've got my expression for x. Remember we said earlier that the fixed deposit is x. And if we solve for this little equation, we are going to get what our original fixed deposit was. So let's put this into our calculator. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to type in the 5957. I'm actually going to type in the 595650, because greater accuracy might give me a clearer answer. And I'm going to divide it by 1 plus 9 over 100 times 6 over 12. Your calculator will work it out if you type it out in exactly that same way. And if I press equals here, the answer comes to 5,700 Rand. So what that means is that I originally invested 5,700 Rand and I earned interest for 6 months, and the total that I got back was this amount here of 5957. So the 5,700 was the fixed deposit. Let me just write it in here. 5,700 we've calculated, but we've received a total of 5957. So it should be easy to see that the interest is going to be the difference between the two, and the interest is going to be 5957 minus 5,700. It's a much easier calculation. You can check my answer, but the answer comes to 257 Rand. So that's what the interest was, and the 5,700 is what the fixed deposit was. If we go back to our answer book then, what we do is we're going to fill in next to where it says fixed deposit, we'll fill in the original amount of 5,700, and then the 257 Rand. Remember, the question says we can ignore the cents. That is our interest on fixed deposit. That was hard work, but we're nearly done. Only a few more transactions to go. If we look back at the information sheet, it now tells us that a dishonored check for 800 Rand appeared on the bank statement. This check was received from B. Bright, a tenant, and the check was post-dated to the 15th of December 2008. If we have a post-dated check, you can check in the glossary, but a post-dated check is a check where the where the date is in the future. So a post-dated check is a check where the date is in the future. I could get a check, receive a check today, and then the date is for the end of the month. I actually can't do anything with that check until such time as that day comes. So we've actually been foolish to try and pay in that dishonoured check. Obviously the bank is not going to take it because the date is only 15th of December and we're now in October. So obviously the check is going to be dishonoured. If a check is dishonoured, what then happens is that the person who gave us the check has to give us a new one because we should have actually just kept it until the 15th of December and then paid it in. So we cancel it out in the same way that we cancelled out the previous dishonoured check, which was in 4.4. We're going to cancel this one out in the same way, except this check was not received from a debtor like the other one, it was received from a tenant. So they're testing your English a little bit as well by checking that you know that a tenant is somebody who pays you for rent. So what we do here, the tenant now hasn't paid me after all, so we actually have to cancel out the original receipt. The way we do that is exactly the same as the other one where we cancelled this dishonoured check from the debtor. All we're going to do now though, instead of writing debtor's control, we are going to write rent income because the tenant would have paid us this money for rent, and the amount, luckily we don't have to do a calculation here, just have to remember that the amount was 800 Rand. So what we'll do on our bank reconciliation statement, on our bank account, is we will just put the 800 Rand over here. We haven't received that money for rent after all. It's as if we're paying the tenant back and she must give us a new check for rent in the next month. I'm sure that that one made sense to you. Let's look at the next transaction, which states that a deposit for 4250 that was made on the 30th of November, and this appears in the cash journal only. What did we say earlier about amounts that appear in the cash journal only and don't appear on the bank statement? We must remember that these items are outstanding. So luckily, we have left space for our outstanding deposits. We know the format. This 4250 is simply an outstanding deposit, and you all know how to deal with that one. Let's go back to our answer book, and we need to go to the bank reconciliation statement. And in this bank reconciliation statement, under outstanding deposits, we're simply going to put the amount in the credit column. See how helpful this is. I wrote that I'm going to credit my outstanding deposits. I don't even need to think about it. All I need to do is take the amount of 4250 in my information book and write it on the correct side of my amount. Sorry, it's on the wrong column. 4250, wrong row I mean, 4250. It's an outstanding deposit of 4,250. We're going to have to check whether it's going to be paid next month again. Also, please note, let's say you cannot remember for the life of you how to do the bank reconciliation statement, and you don't know on which side an outstanding deposit goes, and you don't know on which side an outstanding check goes, and you just want to give up and say you failed the paper. Just remember that the information book has given us a bank reconciliation statement, and here they show you in which column the outstanding deposits and the outstanding checks go. So you could very easily just look back at this and jog your memory and make sure that you use all the information that's given to you, because sometimes the answer is staring you in the face. Let's look at 4.9. 4.9 now says that the following checks issued had not yet been presented for payment by the 30th of November. So here is a check for number 927 for 2,200 Rand. It's dated the 3rd of December 2008, but that doesn't matter because we have paid that check. We've recorded in our CPJ that we've paid the person the check, and obviously the person's going to wait until the 3rd of December before they pay it, but we have to still record that check as outstanding until such time as the person's able to take it to the bank. And we also have check number 933 for 1925, and here's the little trick in the question. You should also always look back to your bank reconciliation statement and remember this check here of 1250, check number 840, was also outstanding. So sometimes check from last month is still outstanding and must be recorded again. So let's make those entries. Our first one was check number 840 for 1250. So remember I said to you that you should record the numbers, number 840, and that was 1250. That needs to go in the debit column. You all know that. Then we need to go and look at our next two, which are the ones that appeared at the end here in 4.9, 927 and 933 for 2,200 and 1925. Let's fill them in. So number 927 and number 933, and they were for, just have to check the numbers again, 2,200 and 1925. 2,200 and 1925. And there we go. We've included all of our outstanding checks. Now let's have a look at the last pieces of information. Finally, it tells us these two. It's the last two things in the question that we have to worry about. It says the following errors were discovered. It says goods sold for cash on the 26th of November were recorded in the cash journal as 2125. So we sold these goods for cash and we recorded it in our cash journal, in other words our CRJ, because it was a sale, for 2125. But the correct amount of 2117 appeared on the bank statement. Who has made the mistake? We recorded 2125, the bank recorded 2117, and the bank is correct. That obviously means that we have made the mistake. So let's see what the mistake was. We recorded 2125, the bank recorded 2117, and the difference is 8 Rand. So we recorded that we received 2125, the bank recorded that we received only 2117, so all we have to do is reduce our bank account by the difference, which is 8 Rand. So if we go back here to our bank account, we're going to need to fill in 8 Rand over here. It's in the CPJ because we recorded that we received more money than we actually received. So it's as if we're paying that money back. And we received that money for sales, so our sales account also has to be affected. So I'm just going to write the word sales in our bank account. Let's look at the second part of that transaction, which says a check issued to C. Lewis, a creditor, was recorded in the correct cash journal as 650. In other words, we recorded in our CPJ that we paid this person 650 Rand. The amount reflected on the bank statement is only 605. You should be able to see very easily that there's a difference of 45 Rand. So we recorded 650 and we should have recorded 605. It tells us though that the amount on the bank statement is correct. In other words, we have again made the mistake. So we recorded that we paid the person 45 Rand more than we actually paid them. So the way we fix that is we make this entry in the CRJ. Let's go back to our bank account. So in our CRJ, we're going to make it go up by 45 Rand, which is the difference between the two. And because we originally paid the person who was a creditor, the details here are going to be creditors control. Right, mindsetters, we're nearly done with this question. We've now made all the entries that we need to make. All we now have to do is complete our bank reconciliation statement. The way we do it though, our first step is to just balance and total our general ledger account in the bank. And let's just do that quickly. If I add the debit side, I'm going to just type it in. It's going to be 950 plus 49,000 plus 550 plus 25 plus 5,700 plus 257 plus 45. That gives me an answer of 56527, which is going to be my total on the debit side. So let me just fill that in. 56527. This side here, if I add it up, $53,000 plus 150 plus 363 plus 800 plus 8. Total comes to 54321. So I know that it's got to be 56527, so I'm just going to subtract 56527 to see what the difference is. 56527. I balance my account out and I get 2,206, which is my balance carry down here. Let me just fill it in properly. Which is my balance carry down here. 2,206 is going to be my balance carried down. So you see now the two sides add up to 56527, and then obviously I should bring it down for the 1st of December. Balance brought down of 2206. When you've done that, very easy what you do next, you just see on which side your balance brought down is. Can you see that the balance brought down is on the debit side of the bank account? What we then do is we take that 2,206 and we just write it in our bank reconciliation statement as the balances per bank account. We have seen that it's a debit and the amount is 2,206 Rand. Always the balance brought down, you simply put in the column where it appears. So now we're actually done with this question. All we now have to do is work out the totals and calculate that missing number that we were looking for at the very beginning. So let's work out our totals here. We know that the two sides have to add up, and we also know that the favourable balance as per bank statement is here where I've drawn the two X's. Going to erase them because we have to calculate that now. So let's add up the debit side quickly. We've got here 1250 plus 2,200 plus 1925 plus 2206, and that gives me the answer of 7581. Let's write it in the bottom here. 7,581 Rand. We know that this side must also be 7581. So to get to that 7581, we need to work out this missing number. All we need to do now is subtract the 400 and subtract the 4250, and that gives me a total of 2931, which must appear in my credit column. 2931. If I had to add the two sides up now, the two balance, and I'm able to account for all the discrepancies between my bank account and the bank statement. I've fixed up my journals, I've fixed up my bank ledger account by recording all the information that wasn't there, and I've also shown that at the end of the month the bank thinks that I have 2931 in my bank account. I think that I have 2206 in my bank account, and the difference between these two is because the bank has not yet processed this deposit of 4250 and these three checks of 1250, 2200 and 1925, plus there's still an error of 400 Rand that they have to correct. Once they've done all that, then our two amounts will agree and there will be no discrepancies anymore. So that's the purpose of a bank reconciliation statement. Identify the discrepancies, fix them, and make sure that your amount that you think you have in your bank account matches the amount that the bank thinks you have in your bank account. Once you've done that, you can end the month very happy because you know that nobody has made a mistake, that there's been no fraud, that there isn't anybody who is stealing your money, and that all your bookkeeping is up to date. Join us again soon for another Mindset Accounting Grade 11 lesson.